I want to address the next couple of things. 1717 to 1816 is the way I divided this. Now that's a little strange, but it's actually a story about the promise and then delivery of a baby. So can you go with me? I'm going to make this a girl story, okay? Because it's like baby stuff and all that, okay? Now here's what we want to do. We've been studying blessing from Abraham's perspective, but God was also at work in Abraham's wife, Sarah. So God's work in Sarah is not incidental. Her obedience and her surrender is also essential to the narrative. She looks like a, quote, background player, but she's not a background player. Many people, and I think many Christian women, feel like when they read the Bible that they're background characters, that they're kind of like not the story. That's not true. That's not true at all. Behind her husband, behind the children, was more than just a soccer mom. Obviously, she's more than a laundry sponsor, okay? It's hard to feel significant sometimes because so much of the Bible is taught in the context of males that sometimes, ladies, we rob you of something important. So I want to try and balance that. I've never been a woman, I confess that to you, but I can tell you that I live with a godly woman, and it is an incredible, unbelievable blessing. And I have also observed some who live with ungodly women, and it is an unbelievable curse, okay? So godliness for you ladies is going to be really important. Let's put it this way. If I have a principle for 7:17 to 18:16, let me give it to you this way. Your surrender to God as a woman will be vital to the blessing of your family. Your surrender to God as a woman will be vital to the blessing of your family. And, in a very real sense, the future of the heritage of your family. I think it's important that you understand that there have been some godly mothers, godly women in the story that changed the story dramatically. Now, I need to do some principles, and these principles aren't small, because this is the first deliberate interjection we've had of a woman in the story since Eve. And can we all just admit that Chava, or Eve, her story's not terribly flattering to women, okay? Because we tend to be dominated by the fact that she blew it. But she blew it because he blew it. They blew it. So let's stop looking at it like, you know, she did this. She didn't do this. God actually literally made it clear that they both did this. Okay, let me start with 17, 15, and 16. God said to Abraham, "As for Sarah your wife, you shall not call her Sarai, but Sarah." In other words, Sarai is my, okay? And so when you get to Sarah, you're dealing with princess. Sarai is my princess. In other words, you'll no longer call her for yourself. You'll now call her for all the others. The princess instead of my princess, okay? And so it says, verse 16, "I will bless her, and indeed I will give you a son by her." Underline, circle, star, by her. "Then I will bless her." That is, from giving her a son, I will go on and bless her. "And she will be a mother of nations, kings of peoples will come from her." In our story, Abraham had every responsibility to cover his wife by sharing with her what God had said to him. You need to understand that the very first principle is what I'm going to call a covering principle. The covering principle is a godly mom has to recognize that God reveals his plans most clearly to the person that God has placed over her. Now, this is an idea that we have to start into, but the law is going to make clear as we get into Exodus and Numbers. Ladies, you were born without the responsibility of passing sin. Your baby is not a sinner because of you. Your baby is a sinner because of your husband. Sin is passed through the male. And what was faulted was genetically through the blood. You don't provide that part to the baby, and so therefore you don't bring about their sin nature. That's why Mary could have a baby, and the baby, being fathered by the Heavenly Father, was sinless at birth. Mary wasn't sinless, So how could a sinful woman give birth to a sinless child? Because under the law, a woman doesn't pass the sin, the man does. However, you also have a penalty. The good thing is you don't pass the sin nature, so your kids are ornery and it's his fault, okay? The bad side is you're not uncovered. That is, judicially before God, you were created to be covered by another. And for most of you at this point in your life, your covering is your father. Some of you don't have one. That's a different story. But the natural covering is the father. That is the one who passed your sin nature to you is your covering. When you go to your wedding, you take your father's name off the end and put your husband's name on the end. And by naming something, remember when Adam named the animals? When you name something in the Bible, you become responsible for them. So your husband takes responsibility for you when you take his name. That is why I am principally against women who continue to keep their old, unmarried name after their marriage. It's a slap. They may not be conscious of it, but it is. The fact of the matter is, who gives this woman to be taken by this man in marriage is the father's statement of position of responsibility. He then, in the marriage, if you ever get married in one that I do, I will actually tell your father to take your hand and put it on the hand of your husband, your husband-to-be. He is taking your hand and saying, I'm stepping out of the responsibility in heaven. That covering will now be him. The covering principle is God will speak to you often through the one who is your covering. It's not exclusive that way, but it's always that way when your covering is godly. Marry a godly man, or you're cutting off God speaking to your life in a great degree. Doesn't mean he can't use you. It means it's hard for him to get through the noise, because the covering is actually blocking what he's saying. Let me say it this way. If you marry an unsaved person, you marry a person and you pull a cover over you that isn't a God-responsive cover. And that's going to mute God's voice in your own life. That's the covering principle. Let me move on, and if that's not clear, we'll come back to that, because we will come back to the issue of covering. By the way, what's an illustration of covering in the scriptures? A man could take a loan in the Bible. A woman couldn't. She couldn't take a loan without her husband or her father signing for the loan. She couldn't make a vow before the Lord without her husband or her father acknowledging the vow. Why? Because you have no direct line of responsibility. You're a covered individual. The sad and hard part about our society is we have so tried to use radical feminism to mar that picture that we made that something evil. It's almost like I'm less of a parent because I don't have a womb. I'm not less of a parent because I don't have a womb. I can't have a baby. That doesn't mean that I'm not a parent. And the fact of the matter is, this modern way of thinking is so radically anti-God that it takes everything that God cherishes in the story and tries to mar it. Ladies, you were taught to believe that if you have a covering, that makes you unequal, and therefore it's just wrong. There's a reason why I believe that women can't be pastors. There's a reason, because it's in the text, but there's a reason I take the text literally. She couldn't even take a loan. Okay? Does that make you less a person? No, you're not less a person. You have a position of function. Listen, one of the things I want you to remember is function doesn't determine value. Function does not determine value. I am not less a parent because I don't have a womb. Function doesn't determine value. What determines value? What God says. The stamp of God on you. Look, who has the management responsibilities of the home in the Bible? Largely it's the women, okay? Don't tell me these guys did all these great things. For the most part, she's buying, she's selling. Read Proverbs 31. She's got the whole thing under control. What's he doing? Whatever she said. No, I'm just kidding. Believers have to understand, and this is the important thing. Believers have to understand where the boundaries are. The boundaries are where God puts them. Not where the world makes you feel insecure because they put the boundaries separate. Listen to me, ladies. They are not adding to you. They are subtracting from you. When they try to make you something that God told you not to be, they are subtracting from you, not adding to you. You go, yes, but does that mean I should get the vote? Well, of course. What does that have to do with it? Shouldn't I get equal pay for equal work? Yeah, but what does that have to do with it? See, when you mix those issues with whether or not I'm the same as him, can we just get over the unisex movement and look at each other and recognize we're not all the same? I mean, I'm really okay with this. Can we get past that? The thing we have to understand here is that Sarah's faith was a reflection of her husband's weakness to prepare her for God's great work. Because in the story, she's going to say, what? I'm going to have the baby? She's going to find it hard to move with God's step. Why? Because her husband did not bring her along. Now, look at verse 17 for a minute. Verse 17 says the following. It says, then Abraham fell on his face, and he laughed and said in his heart, will a child be born to a man who's 100 years old? And will Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? I want you to notice that what does Abraham's inner heart do with the promise of God?
Laughs at it.
Yeah, so, listen to this. Abraham said to God, oh, that Ishmael might live before you. I want you to know, verse 18, I want you to know that God wanted to bless through Sarah, and Abraham was struggling when he looked at Sarah to see it. And he said, I can't do it, she can't have one, and I don't see how this is going to work. And it seemed funny to him in a perverse kind of way. But God said, no, but Sarah, your wife, will bear you a son, and you will call his name Yitzhak, Isaac. That's the word laughter. You will call him laughter. And I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him. I want you to note a couple of features here. First of all, in 1717, a godly mother has to believe that God is going to make more of your life than you can make of your life. And a godly father has to believe God will make more of your life than you can make of your life. You've got to be able to believe that God is bigger than you. God is bigger. He is. So, I need you to remember that when you get to a point and you're going, I don't see how I can get out of this problem. I've got this bill and I can't pay it. God is bigger. I don't see how we could possibly pull this off. The number of people in our group can't possibly do this level of ministry. God is bigger. You're going to have to come back over and over and over to until God has to be there, we're liable to dismiss him from the room. Now, when you look at the verses carefully, look at the details. God might call you to live truths beyond your experience. Can I just suggest to you, God will cause you to live truths beyond your experience. Does anybody here think they're qualified to be a missionary? Anybody? But God will call you to a mission field, and it's so far beyond your capabilities, you're going to go, you got to be kidding me. He's going to drop me in a jungle and I'm going to reach people? Yeah. Exactly how? Take me with you. I'll do the work. You show up. The 88% of life is showing up. Okay? The other thing is in verse 18, God may call you to do something that's beyond the desires of the people around you. The other people around you might not even want this to happen. I see in verse 18 that Abraham's not on board with what God is about to do through Sarah. He's going, look, we already got a little guy running around here. Why don't you just choose Ishmael? Come on, Ishi, he's such a neat kid. You could, come on. And God said, that's not my plan. Why? You know what happens if Ishmael was the plan? Sarah gets cut out of the blessing. And God's intent was not just to bless Abraham, it was also to bless Sarah. So Abraham, can everybody see in verse 18 that Abraham thought he was elevating Ishmael, but what he was doing was slapping down the value of his wife? How many of you think it would have poured salt on the wounds of Sarah's heart if Ishmael was the one that was chosen? Because Hagar's going, by the way, it's my baby. And God wanted to bless her. She seems like a background person in the story, but she's the one that introduced the problem of Hagar and the problem of Ishmael, isn't she? So she pulled the string and it ended up biting her. However, God wasn't done with her life yet either. Can I just remind you, you might do something really stupid and think, okay, now I'm out of the running. You're not. God's not done yet. Now, I need you to see her exchange principle. You remember what the trust exchange is? Give up that which I know for that which I've never seen, but I have God's promise on it. I want you to look at verse 19. But God said, no, Sarah will be your wife. Sarah, your wife, will bear you a son, and you shall call his name Laughter, Yitzhak, and I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him. A godly mother has to grasp that God's going to replace surrendered doubt with laughter, surrendered longing with joy. God is able to do in you what you cannot do in you. Now, I don't want to be crass, but you didn't give yourself the ability to have babies. God did. Therefore, God can reignite parts that aren't working anymore. He can do that. Why? Because he's the one who designed the original system. The key to blessing is always surrender. That's the key to blessing. We can have an influence on others, but we can't change other people. Conversely, we're responsible to yield ourselves to God. And the whole purpose is that he would change us. The point is, why do we spend so much time griping about changing others while we lack in ourselves the ability to surrender and be changed? Okay, I want you to get down to verse 20 for a second. Verse 20 says, as for Ishmael, I have heard you. That's a play, by the way. Ishmael, God has heard. As for Ishmael, I've heard you, Abe. Behold, I will bless him and will make him fruitful and will multiply him exceedingly. You know, a godly mother has to believe that God touches the needs of all your heart when you trust him with your whole heart. And God deals with us in understanding of who we are and what we care about. And a godly father has to understand that as well. God knew that Abraham wanted desperately for Ishmael to get a blessing from God. And God didn't look past Abraham's desire. He looked into his heart and said, I get it, but I'm working another plan over here and I want to bless Sarah as well. But don't worry, I saw the desire of your heart, and I heard that you have a desire for Ishmael, and I will do it. What parent can't understand the love he felt for Ishmael? I mean, come on. He's been spending all his time. What mother couldn't understand that although Ishmael wasn't her child, her husband loved that child? I want you to think about something for a minute. When you deal with people in families, often you're going to be dealing with people in what I would call the cobbled together family. This is people from previous marriages that brought kids together. How many of you know a family like this? These are people that, it's like the Brady Bunch, they come together from and all of a sudden now you got all these. I want you to remember that that's actually addressed in the Abraham story. That Sarah has to learn to love a child that's not from her. That has to happen. So the stepmother here is Sarah. Under the law, she's the mother, but under reality and biology, she's the stepmother. Real mothers would like to be able to eat a whole candy bar by themselves and drink a whole cake without a Coke without floaters in it. Drink a whole Coke without all these floaters in it. Real mothers know that their kitchen utensils are probably going to end up in the sandbox. Real mothers often have sticky floors, filthy ovens, and happy kids. The fact of the matter is real mothers know that dried Play-Doh doesn't come out of shag carpet. Real mothers ask, why me? And get their answer in a little voice, because I love you best, Mom. Real mothers know that a child's growth is not measured by height or years or by grade. It's marked by the progression from mama to mom to mother. The fact of the matter is that God is going to use children in your life as a development point in your life. Let me get down to verses 21 and 22 for a second. My covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you at this season next year. When he finished talking with him, God went up from Abraham. A godly mother, a godly father, has to recognize that God doesn't wait for us to make the plan. Look, if it's not clear to you, 17 chapters into the book, I know there's 1,189 chapters in the Bible. You're 17 chapters in, and here's what you should know. You don't have to make a plan for your life. You have to find God's. He has one. He has one for you. And the fact of the matter is, God went up, having made the plan, and dropped by to tell him what it is. Most of you, at the place you are in life, you've been thinking you have to cook up a plan for your life. And what I need you to understand is you don't. You absolutely do not. But what you do need to be able to do is figure out how to hear God's plan for your life. Because He's got one. And the point is that when you get to the beginning of chapter 18, God has left, and the Lord had appeared to him by the oaks of Mamre, that's down by a city of Hebron, while he was sitting in the tent door in the heat of the day. God appears to him. When he lifted up his eyes and looked, behold, 3 men were opposite him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the earth and said, My Lord, if now I have found favor in your sight, please do not pass your servant by. Please let a little water be brought and wash your feet and rest yourselves under the tree, and I may bring a piece of bread that you may refresh yourselves. After that you may go on, since you have visited your servant. And they said, So do as you have said. You need to understand how incredibly important hospitality is in the Middle East. Hospitality is incredibly important. You will meet the parents, you will meet the sister, you will meet the cousin, you will have coffee, you will have tea, just to say hi. And it doesn't matter whether you're in a rush. There's no such thing as a rush in the Middle East. So he's sitting by his door and people go walking by and he goes, wait, come to my tent. Hospitality is one of the key issues of the Middle Eastern life. Why? Because when you were a desert people, to be alone means to die, okay? Hospitality is what you count on. I was out in a storm. I got out of a camp. I was in the Sinai Desert. We got out of, we had a camel caravan we were traveling in. Now, I don't know if you know what riding a camel is. They're called ships in the desert. Because with a camel, both his front legs go forward, both his right legs go forward, then left. Then right, then left. So what happens when you're on it is like a ship, only faster. The horizon is moving like this. Okay, now what I need you to understand is you're up on top of this water bag. Whoosh, whoosh, and a lot of people get sick on top of a camel. Now, I got to get you to the next stop. So I will say to this group, I love you in Jesus' name. If you're throwing up, throw up on the camel because we're going to keep moving. I got to get to the food drop and I haven't seen food in a day and I am not going to be late. Because if I'm late, we lose our food again or potentially lose our food. Now we're out there. We got caught up in a situation where somebody had marked our path and knew where we were leaving food. Long story short, they were stealing the food. So I had to go back out to an emergency station to pick up food. But a sandstorm had come and there was no way for me to see my way through the desert. You don't have to worry because the camel has the ability to see when you don't. So you wrap your face in a rag and wrap your whole face in a rag. You get on the camel and you slap his back and he'll go back to the emergency station. They know where they are. Camels have very long eyelashes. Eyelashes, that's this part, yeah. They have long eyelashes, and so they actually can flick their eyelashes and keep the sand off of them, and they have an extra cornea of their eye so that they have a very thick skin over their eye. So that blowing sand will actually like hit your skin. It's like a sand blaster that you use on a car, but they're able to get you through it. Now, when you go back and you travel on the camel, he takes you back into the camp. I had to get the stuff for the camp and then get going. The important part is that as you're making your way back through the sandstorm, you don't trust any of your own instincts. You can't tell where the ledges are. You're walking on cliffs, okay? You don't know where the ledges are. You're trusting the camel. The camel has a padded foot, and he can move along and just get to where he's going. If there's a big crusted area with sand that blows over, Have you ever walked like on a beach with real soft sand that you sink down into? Okay, it's usually away from the water. It's up like back where the dunes are. I will sink down into the sand, but the camel can walk across it. He's actually able, he's got padded feet and he can leverage himself in 4 directions. And he can walk across the top of sand that if you jump off the camel, you'll sink into the sand. But the camel's standing on it. I got out and I was trying to make my way to the way station. The problem is it got so bad and then it got dark. Now the problem is the camel can make it through the sandstorm, but he can't make it in darkness quite so well. It was perilous. So what I did was I saw a tent in the distance. The sandstorm had about 80% abated. Now we're still getting a little bit, it wasn't so bad, so I had taken the thing off my head and shook it out. And I could, I was getting a little bit of a pelting in the face, but it wasn't bad. So I could see that there was a tent off in the distance. So I turned the camel and pulled him toward the tent. When you stop at a tent, there's a whole big long way to say hello. You don't walk up and knock on the tent because it's a tent. Doesn't make any sound, okay? You actually circle around outside and sit and have the camel sit down, and you stand next to the camel. And you wait until you're summoned into the tent. And you'll hear, and it's the actual moving of the coffee grinder. That's the hi, I see you. I know you're out there. In the Middle East, you don't do direct statements to people. There's a symbolic way. There's a way I can explain this. Have you ever been driving and you knew that the person was over there and they wanted to get over, but you're kind of acting like you don't see them? Because if you turn, then you've acknowledged them, then you have to let them in, right? But if you act like you don't see them, they're going to think you're stupid, but that's okay because you're still in the spot you want to be in. It's like that. In the Middle East, people sort of feel each other and they don't make direct questions. Now, I want you to picture these guys are walking by Abram's tent. He sees them. He understands that he wants to invite them in. It's an honor to be able to serve someone. So when you serve people from your home, you say, "You do me honor." This brings back bad memories for some of you who have traveled with me, especially in food, In the beginning in Israel, when we go there, I generally separate from you when I go and eat, because I eat with my friends, and if they're Arab friends like my drivers, we eat from the same bowl. And when they say, "Mind if I dunk," they mean in your coffee, not in their coffee. We share communally everything. So if he licks his fingers, sticks his thing in, and sticks it up to your mouth, you eat it. And it's a little traumatic for people from the West, so we let you eat over there where you eat all your own separate stuff, and you have, this is my plate and my napkin and my cutlery, and we're over there slopping around with each other, and it's just it's fun. Anyway, I want you to note Abraham and Sarah in the passage. Look at verse 1. They observed potential to serve somebody. They saw an opportunity. Then they reflected the desire to serve. They eagerly ran to meet the need in verse 2. Then they deliberately ranked themselves. They humbled themselves before the other. Then they added value. They sought ways to be useful to somebody else. This story is going somewhere. God is going to do something profound through them. Then they built patterns. Abraham and Sarah had a pattern of serving. They served outsiders. They built into their own lives. When you get to verse 6, they made themselves ready to serve as a team. So it wasn't sharp in verse 6. You have to listen. So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah and said, "Quickly, prepare 3 measures of flour, knead it into bread cakes." It wasn't like she's going, "Here he goes again, pushing me around." The story is, Abraham and Sarah have learned to be hospitable. They look forward to it together. So he calls on her to do this. They have an agreed set of values in verse 7. Abraham also ran to the herd, took a tender and choice calf and gave it to the servant. That's your appliances. There you go. Okay, call the servant Ken Moore. Okay, never mind. But here's the servant, and he, the servant, hurriedly prepared it. See, here's the thing. This is a family that not only had the same desires, they had the same value system. They saw these men and said, "We have the opportunity to serve somebody." By the way, this is not an American story. If it were an American story, he would have said, "Get the heck off my property." Because we are geared to put fences and doors and keep people out. Tell me the truth. Are you not annoyed when someone calls you on the phone to sell you something? This is my phone. Get off of it. So the truth is that this is a Middle Eastern story. When you live in the desert, you don't see a lot of people. When they come by, you get excited. Okay, some of you think, Sebring is this, but it's not. The other thing is that they had purposeful savings. What do I mean? You don't serve goats you don't have. They built up their flock so that they could actually be a blessing to other people. I want you to understand, Abraham and Sarah, they have a servant's principle in their life. Now, I want you to see that a godly mother recognizes that God can use even our weaknesses in a way that He wants to use them. Look at verse 9. Then they said to him, "Where is Sarah your wife?" And he said, "There in the tent." He said, "I will surely return to you at this time next year, and behold, Sarah your wife will have a son." Stop there. God sent 3 visitors. What are they doing there? They have a mission, by the way. The next story is going to show you the mission. They're going to go to Sodom and Gomorrah, and they're going to proclaim something about it. But what's their mission for walking by Abe's house? They could have gone, they're coming from heaven. They could have beamed down to Sodom and Gomorrah and not walked by the tent. Why are they there? To reaffirm the message God already gave them. Why? Because sometimes we need to hear it from other people in addition to hearing it from God. Rebecca, you might hear from God something that you're pretty sure God said to you, but then when somebody else says it to you, it will somehow be reaffirmed much more strongly because you can touch them. Following God is hard because you can't see Him. You can't hug Him. Somehow, when He puts something within your heart and you really know it's Him, you're going to become more bold about it when your friend comes up, puts her arm around you and says, "You know what? I really think you should consider doing exactly what God just told you by yourself." Look what it says in verse 11. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in age. Well, yeah, we got this. 99 and 90. Okay? She was past childbearing. He's trying to underscore, because you have to remember that the Bible was not read for thousands of years. How did Abraham's children, how did the children of Israel learn God's word? Yeah, it was oral. Somebody told them the story. So every now and then in a Middle Eastern story, they come back and make the point again. They make the point again. And the point is, really old, not able, way past childbearing, supply, toothless, hairless, whatever. Verse 12. Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "After I become old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also?" And the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh, saying, 'Shall I indeed bear a child when I am so old?' Is anything too difficult for the Lord?" Underline that one. Is anything too difficult for the Lord? That's verse 14. Is anything too difficult for the Lord? What's the answer to the question? No. And in reality, at the appointed time, I will return to you at this time next year, and Sarah will have a son. Sarah denied it, however, saying, "I did not laugh, for she was afraid." And he said, "No, but you did laugh." Then the men rose up from there, looked down toward Sodom, and Abraham was walking with them to send them off. You have to understand something. God knows what's going on in your heart, and He knows when you're afraid, and He understands when you are struggling to believe. You're not discounted because of your fear. You take yourself off the team when you refuse to submit. But even if you submit with fear, still you submit. This line, "Is there anything too difficult for the Lord?" Where will it come up again in the Bible? It's another girl, it's another baby. What's the story? Mary. Is there anything too difficult for the Lord? Now, the next story is one of the really cool stories in the Scripture. And I want to but it's also pretty confusing because it's a split screen story. if you try to do a split screen story, this will be your first one that you'll see in the Bible. It's really confusing. I want to call chapter 19, Choosing My Stage. So I'm going to push past 18, go right into 19, and I'm going to ask this, because I'm coming back, and choosing my stage is both 18 and 19. You're going to flip back and forth. Here's what I want to do. I want to put a split screen, 18, 19. And I'm going to blow through these two and go back and forth for a minute. I need you to just observe something, okay? In 18:1, somebody read it really loud.
Now the Lord appeared to him by the oaks of Mamre while he was sitting in the tent door in the heat of the day. Okay,
19:1 says, now 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening as Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. In 18:1, Abraham is at his tent next to the oaks of Mamre. In 19:1, I'm going somewhere with the details, I promise you. In 19:1, Lot is sitting at the gate. At Sodom. Let me say this. Gates in the Bible were places of judgment. Let me suggest it to you this way. In the Bible, people sitting at the gate of the city were the judges of the city. There's a reason. They have to judge whether or not you're allowed to come into the city. So when I show you in Israel gates of ancient cities, you're going to see that the gates have chambers. And in those chambers, do you remember in the Ruth story, Boaz goes to the gate of the city and they swap sandals in the gate of the city? The gate is where all the public court transactions happen in the city. In other words, it's like the courtroom or the city council building. So when Lot is sitting in the city council building of Sodom, he is at the heart of its judgment. What do you know about Sodom? Good city, bad city. Thumbs down, bad city. But at the heart of it, right in the heart of Sodom, is Lot. Why is this important? Both people chose a place to live out their walk with God. Lot knew God. Lot knew the call of God. Lot was in the story since the Ur of the Chaldees from Haran into the land when they split up. And here's what I want you to know. They chose a home. Both of them chose a home to develop God's work in them. They chose a home to develop the lives of their children. The place where Abraham settled on Hebron is an area outside the city. It's an agricultural setting. It's surrounded by vineyards and pathways for shepherds and sheep. But the place where Lot settled was a well-watered plain in the middle of the creature comforts of the zone. And at every one of Lot's choices, God already inserted into the narrative the notion that the men were very, very wicked. So he chose to cozy up to people who had great ease and great wickedness. You don't know anybody who's done that, do you? Anybody who's sort of accepted all the darkness of the world so they could have all the benefits. That's what Lot did. Now, I want you to know that the central point of the narrative is this. Both of these men had the option to choose places to live out their faith. And all of us have the same choice. Most of us have a similar choice. We can choose to live near friends or family or far away because of job opportunities. Lot's not wrong because he chose an easy place. Lot's wrong because he chose an evil place. The wrong part of his choice was remaining there when he got there and it was clear to him that the people there were evil. Why? Because Lot's not alone. Lot had a family. Raise your children in the heart of evil, and then you will see their value system adopt evil. I know you don't believe this, because you think when you have your child that they're going to look up to your eyes from that little baby, and they're just going to believe you and follow you. They're not. They're going to follow the stupid kid down the street. That's what they're going to follow. You know, we're not responsible to know the situation before we get into it, but once we get into the situation, then we're supposed to back out. So I want you to notice they both had not only the place of their home, both of them showed some values. I want you to see Abraham and Lot both showed some solid positive values. See, the problem is I'm battling something here. I'm battling the flannel graph Abraham and Lot story. The flannel graph Abraham and Lot story is Abraham good, Lot bad. That's not true. Lot was a good guy. He really was a good guy. You know that the angels went to save him, right? They're saving him because he's a good guy. So how come his story's so bad? Well, let's follow it. Look at 18:2-7. 18:2-7. And on the split screen of the story, Abraham shows his values. What are his values? We told the story in the last hour. What are his values? Yeah, he's all about service. And not only is he about service, he's all about savings. That is, he's got animals to kill because he saved them up. He's looking for someone to serve, right? Now I want you to split the screen and go 19:1-3 here for Lot. Now we read verse 1, but look at verse 2. It says, end of verse 1, when Lot saw, actually we'll just read all of verse 1. Now the two angels came to Sodom in the evening as Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. Does everybody see how this is exactly like chapter 18? What Abraham did, Lot did. Why? They're from the same family. They have the same values. He said, now behold, my lords, please turn aside into your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. That's a symbol of being able to go to sleep. You wash your feet before you go to bed. And then you may rise up early and go on your way. They said, however, no, but we shall spend the night in the square. That's the open area outside the inner gate of the city. There's an outer gate and an inner gate, and there's a square that's protected. Now listen, he urged them strongly, so they turned aside and entered the house, and he prepared a feast for them and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. Now, here's the thing. He sounds like a pretty good guy, right? So here it's service again, but the other side is protection. Why did he ask them to come in off the square?
Because he knew what the men would do.
He knew exactly what his neighbors were like. And you got to ask yourself, then why is he raising his kids there? What the heck is wrong with this guy that he doesn't understand that if his neighbors are going to rape strangers, why do you want to raise your children there? Now, in a sense, we could say that both of these men were good men. They both wanted to do right. They both saw opportunities to serve. They acted on the opportunities. Now, here's the thing. There's a slight difference between the two. Abraham offered hospitality out of a desire to serve. Lot offered hospitality out of an urgency because they couldn't stay in the square. And so Lot understood the perils of the place he lived. He'd chosen to bring up his children in a place that was like that. Look, even godly people make ungodly decisions. Even mature believers sometimes fall into compromise. They can't see the danger that lies ahead. But when they become aware of the danger, they'll delude themselves into believing, I can handle this, I can take care of this. The question is not whether or not you can handle it. Listen to me. The question is, did God intend you to? Yes, you can decide to go out with somebody who is ungodly and who is known to be a womanizer, and ladies, you can get in his car. And maybe you think you can handle it, but the question is, should you have to? Did God call you to? Because if you're putting yourself in the situation, you got to ask yourself, why am I doing that? I think risky behavior is something that we think is kind of exhilarating and cool. Risky behavior is, you ready for this one? Risky. So they both surrounded themselves with people that showed character when pressed. But the problem is the character that Abraham had surrounding him. Look at this. The value system. Look at the characters. Look at the character of companions. I am not writing well. And when you see that, if you look at in chapter 18, look specifically at Abraham's companions, and you'll see in verses 6 through 8, you'll see that in 6 through 8, that his companions included Sarah in 6, servants in 7, and you see that the Sarah and the servants are on board with service. So he's got Sarah, and he's got servants, and altogether we're just going to call them good, people of good character who get the idea of what it is he's supposed to do. Now go 19:4 to 11. And let's see the character of the people that are surrounding Lot. Before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, surrounded the house, both young and old, all the people from every quarter. Okay, stop right there. Doesn't he make the point? Doesn't Moses make the point? It was like all the people, young, old, every part of town, to let you know that Sodom didn't have a good section. The whole thing was a bad section of town. And they called to Lot and said to him, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may have relations with them. Send them out to us so we can have sex with them." That's what they're saying. Does anybody think, gee, that's really strange? Lot went out to them at the doorway and shut the door behind him and said, look at verse 7, you got to be wondering what's going on in Lot. "Please, my brothers, do not act wickedly. Now behold, I have 2 daughters who have not had relations with man. Please let me bring them out to you and do whatever you like, and do nothing to these men inasmuch as they have come under the shelter of my roof." Okay, how many of you are going, if I was one of Lot's daughters, I would be like going after my dad with a pan right about now. Hello, what do I look like, a piece of meat? He's not actually giving his daughters. He knows they don't want them. He's not saying, gee, I got these girls, let me throw them as fresh meat. That's not what he's doing. It sounds like that. But he's actually saying to them, I would rather give up that which is closest to my heart than allow someone to come under my house of hospitality and be forsaken and thrown to you. Take everything that I have of my future, but leave these men alone. What's interesting is, but they said, stand aside. Furthermore, they said, this one came in as an alien and already is acting like a judge. Now we will treat you worse than them. He thought he could move in and reform the society, and instead the society tolerated him until they were done using him. Welcome to the 21st century. That is exactly what you are seeing. And here's what it says. It says, so they pressed hard against Lot and came near to break the door. But the men reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house with them and shut the door. They struck the men who were at the doorway of the house with blindness, both great and small, so that they wearied themselves trying to find the doorway. So God, through these angelic visitors, struck the people blind so that they could get him out of there and lock the door and keep the door intact. These guys weren't able to do anything about it. Now, one of the obvious differences between Abraham and Lot can be seen in their choice of companions. Who did he choose as his companion? He chose to raise his children around the men of Sodom, and they tolerated him. But he had to look away from such evil in what they were doing that when they finally raised it up and turned it on him, there were no alternatives for him. All it takes for evil men to rule is for good men to do nothing. So he was sitting at the gate as a judge. Lot chose to be in the heart of the city, in the decision-making of the city. He sat where the judges sat in the gate. He surrounded himself with people whose character yielded awful acts, and he tried to reason with them. Both of these guys chose a stage to stand on. Let me just very quickly, I'm not going to go through the whole long story, but let me say that both of them saw their wives hesitant to follow God. So both of them had hesitant wives. Where do I see that? In the story of Abraham, where do you see hesitant wives or hesitant wife? I'm thinking more along the lines of like 18:9 through, I don't know, maybe 18:9 through 16, something like that. We also noted that mirrored his own disbelief from 17:16. So 18:9 to 16, this is the story of her laughing, and I didn't laugh. Yes, you did laugh. And, it's a story. When you first read the story, you think, so what's the big deal? She laughed in her heart. She's 90 years old. Get over it. But the point is, she didn't really trust God because in 17:16, Abraham laughed and he didn't really trust God. She was a perfect reflection of what her husband was, that is, struggled to trust. I want you to look, though, at 19:12 to 26, because this is the story. In 19:12 to 26, what I think you're going to see is Lot's wife. The two men said to Lot, "Whom else have you here? A son-in-law and your sons and your daughters, virgins," as mentioned back in 19:8. And Lot said, "I have 2 daughters who have not yet known relations with a man." That's in 19:8. "Whomever you have in this city, bring them out of this place. For we are about to destroy this place, because their outcry has become so great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it." The interesting thing, Gabe, is that he had a whole city of people. He sent 3 guys. Okay? In other words, these were some buff angels.
So one stayed behind.
Yeah.
Abraham and come back.
Yeah, and that was it. And really, the way it's positioned in the beginning, it looks like it's 2, and then the Lord spoke, and you can't tell if one of them is a theophany of Jesus Christ. That's how we normally say it. So he sent 3 guys. 2 guys show up at Lot, and they say, "We're going to destroy the place," which leads me to the conclusion that some angels are really buff. At any rate, Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law, who were to marry his daughters, and said, "Up, get out of this place. The Lord will destroy the city." But he appeared to his son-in-laws to be jesting. Now, they're not married yet to his daughters, but he has decided to give them lodging so that he can keep them before the wedding to his daughters. They're not yet married, but they don't take him seriously. What does that tell you about the people he's positioning around his children? These guys aren't taking him seriously. When the morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, "Up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, or you will be swept away in the punishment of the city." But he hesitated. So the men seized his hand and the hand of his wife and the hands of his 2 daughters, for the compassion of the Lord was upon him, and they brought him out and put him outside the city. When they had brought them outside, he said, "Escape for your life, do not look behind you." And then later, of course, in verse 26, Lot's wife is going to look behind her and become a pillar of salt. So you have a story of hesitant wives. Do you see how these 2 passages are lining up in a split screen? Now, both of them saw where their choices led them. They saw. Both of them saw where their choices led them. I'm not going to take the time to read it, but 18:27 to 33. Let's say it that way. And 19:27 to 38. Let's take a summary of these 2 for a moment. In 18, when you look at the story of Abraham, it says 18:33, "As soon as he finished speaking to Abraham, the Lord departed, and Abraham returned to his place." In verse 29, it says, "God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities." Abraham will plead for Lot. Abraham understands that there's judgment coming, and what does he do? He takes it seriously and he begins to plead with God. What does Lot do when judgment is proposed to Lot? How does he respond? In verse 27, Abraham arose early in the morning, went to the place where he had stood before the Lord, looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah, and toward all the land of the valley when he saw it, and behold, smoke of the land ascended like the smoke of a furnace. Thus it came out when God destroyed the cities of the valley, and God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities. Lot thought he could raise his children surrounded by evil, walk amidst evil, and reason with it. That's what he thought could happen. My point is, you got to choose the stage of your life. It's not just your value system. It's not just your choices. It's where you live. A guy came to me and he said, I'm having such a struggle with porn in my life. I said, why? He said, because I work at 7-Eleven and I work in the middle of the night, and from 12 to 6, there's hardly anybody who comes in, and I'm standing in front of a rack of pornography. And I said, quit your job. I can't do that. I said, I didn't make a suggestion. I'm telling you, quit your job. Why? Because you're on the wrong stage. Sometimes it's not. Look, if you have a problem with lust, don't go to the beach. If you have a problem with food, don't go to buffets. What are you, stupid? Come on. Sometimes you have to choose the right stage because you have to realize that the stage you're on is going to have a lot to do with how the challenges you face and how hard those challenges are. Why create a harder challenge for yourself? A guy came to me, he said, I'm really having trouble with some of the stuff I'm viewing on my computer. I told him to move the computer to where his wife could watch. What did that do? All of a sudden he wasn't having a problem anymore. Why? Because somebody's watching. And we just have to be smart. Sometimes it's not your strength of will, it's your the strategy you put in play and the intensity of that strategy. Put the right strategy in play and you won't have to fight the battle. Guys, look, I'm talking straight with you because I don't know any other way to get it across. The way to conquer sin in your life is to get yourself away from the place where it occurs and not in the situation it occurs in. Can I just suggest if you have a problem with thievery, don't work at a bank? You understand what I'm saying? Or here's one better. If you have a problem, don't work in a place where money is given to you for which you are not accountable. Don't take the job where you have to not be checked. Let me come to the end of this and say, one of the big problems we have today is ministry is one of the least accountable areas in our society. Do you know that most people don't know what I'm doing? I could be in my office and they can say, well, the pastor's in his study, and what I'm doing is playing solitaire. They have no idea. So if you don't, in and of yourself in your walk with God, have the disciplines already built in, then don't put yourself in a ministry situation where you're not accountable to somebody. Everyone needs accountability. And everyone needs it, and the people who know they need it more than the people who don't know they need it. Fact of the matter is you need to be very careful about putting yourself in a situation where you don't put yourself in temptation. It's very simple. Let me go a step. I'm going to keep walking towards you. Do you have somebody that you normally are a person who tells the truth, except for when you're with that person? And for some reason, you say stuff that just isn't true. Do you normally not gossip about people except for when you're around her, whoever she is? And then the stories come out. Then you start saying negative things. How many of you would say, there's a person in my life that brings out the negative in me? Somehow, if I'm upset about anything, it just comes out. It's like they have this magnetic suck negative out of me thing going on. How many of you have been in a relationship with somebody that you knew it was not going to go in a good direction if left alone? You just knew. Okay? Can we all just be honest and adult with each other and say, you have to choose the stage of your life. You have to choose the stage. It's more than just, well, I choose to do right. It's harder to choose right when you chose the wrong stage. Sometimes you just have to, a scheduled withdrawal. I can't be here. Honestly, there were people in my life for whole periods of my life, I just really couldn't spend time with them because they brought out the worst in me. I had to grow strong before I could spend time with them. Does anybody understand what I'm saying? Because I think one of the things we do is we suddenly get surprised by our fall into sin when it was pretty predictable. Can you all see pretty clearly that Lot was being pretty stupid about his ideas? How many of you think that Lot's girls were godly? Yeah, not so much. Their boyfriends weren't either. And the truth is, was that really just their choice to be ungodly, or did something of Lot's choice play into their choice? You're going to think it's about you, and you're going to make choices, and then you're going to have children, and you're going to realize that you changed your children. All right, do you get the idea? Now, can somebody come back now as we close? What is a split screen biography? What is this? What does it do?
Two people's stories that kind of intertwine.
Yeah, they're intertwined, but they're told one back to back after the other. You're going to see this happen a couple times. When you see it, so do you see the value now of studying 18 and 19? If you read the whole story, you knew that this happened. But if you were only studying like chapter by chapter through the Bible, and you read 18, you would come to a different conclusion. You wouldn't see what the writer's trying to do, because you don't know what 18's about until you know what 19's about. Because 18 and 19 are about the same thing. And that basically, here's the key principle. It's not just what I choose to do, it's where I choose to put my stage that has a lot to do with how I come out.